Alright, good evening. I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply, and in today's video we are going to make the mini Padfolio. This template's been out for a really long time, so it's another one of those that I've totally fell behind the ball on getting the video made. The template is fairly simple, especially if you've seen a picture of it completed, but here's what we're looking at. Okay, it is a small Padfolio to hold the, I think it's like 5x8 piece of paper. Uno momento, por favor. 5x7. 5x7 little mini pad. Alright, so it's very simple design. Has a little pocket over here for loose papers. Has a pocket for your business cards. Has a pocket for the notepad right there. And that's it. Very easy. We are going to complicate things a bit because although you don't have to, I am going to fully line mine, and we're going to use a little bit of stiffener in the front and the back to make them more rigid than the spine. All right. The leather I'm using it kind of calls for that because it's some pretty soft stuff. It's this new waxy stuff that we're carrying that's, oh my gosh, so nice and pretty and soft. But anyway, so that's what we're doing. So without further ado, we will get to it. I'm going to move the camera down so that you can see my workbench and not my pretty face, and let's get going. All right, so here's what we're looking at. The template is like several others, that it's a puzzle piece so that it's easier to mail, and hopefully the post office doesn't work so hard to break it. All right, so it sets right there on your leather. Now, since this is just a simple rectangle and it's ambidextrous, and I don't want to pull the paper off the back, which you can, then you can see through it and see the blemishes on your leather and stuff like that. I'm going to turn it over because, again, this is a waxy leather and it's very slick, and this will help me to cut my stuff out without it sliding around too much on my leather. Got me a pretty new scalpel handle from Clay Miller recently, and so we're just going to cut this rectangle out. Stuff cuts like butter until you break your yeah. Got another one sitting back here, but I don't know how sharp the blade is, so we shall see. It's also a different shape of blade than what I like to use. Okay, this piece of leather can be anything from, say, 5 to 7 ounce, and that's about where this one is. This is about a 5-6 ounce piece that I'm cutting it out of. And yeah, I didn't do a very good job. That blade that broke was obviously kind of dull too. I should have replaced it anyway. So you'll just get to watch me cut this piece twice. Or 3 times. Alright, when all else fails, let's just get a new blade out, because seriously, that thing is just crazy. So I will pull the busted one out of my knife there. Put a new one in it. Alright, now we will Charlie Mike. Some of you veterans out there will get that. I usually have more time to make a video, but I'm a little bit of a rush tonight. I'm hoping that by the time the family finishes Tanner's karate practice that I'll be mostly done here and can wrap this up. Hoping. So I know the dogs would like to go home too. Alright, finally got that piece out. Alright, again, I'm going to fully line this piece. Alright, so to do that, I'm going to be using just some 2 to 3 ounce English bridle of kind of a contrasting color. And I really think that this tan looks really nice with that kind of medium brown color there. So that's what I'm going to use. In order to use this, I must glue these two pieces together. Again, this step is entirely optional to fully line this thing, but it will make a much nicer finished product if we do. Okay, now thought I'd show a neat trick with this video especially though, and we are going to put some stiffener in between the layers. Alright, Tandy sells a really nice bag stiffener, and I think that's actually what it's called on their website, is just bag stiffener. And it's like this giant roll of like a thin fibrous board. It's great stuff. I've used it for years. I am not using it today though, and the main reason is because I can't find mine. It's somewhere out there in that warehouse in one of the many stacks of leather that I've hidden away. And so yeah, this is just some, it's heavier than poster board and but lighter than cardboard. It's just some stuff that all of our Herman Oak shipments are wrapped in this stuff, and so we're going to use it. I've got tons of this stuff. If you're a local customer and you're ever in the area, feel free to come get a couple of sheets of this stuff, because I hate to throw it away knowing how well it can be used for pattern making and things like that. So I'm going to cut out a couple of pieces just roughly a little bit larger than my notepad. I'm not even going to measure it. I'm just going to cut one and then I'll make sure the other one matches it. And again, they're just going to be slightly larger than the notepad, and they'll be great. So to do that, I've lined up my notepad with one side of this, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the bottom line even with the notepad. And like I said though, this will be slightly larger. I'm thinking probably 1/4 of an inch will be good. So all I'm going to do now is move it where my estimation of 1/4 of an inch is, away from both this line and that line down there, and then I'm just going to cut out the perimeter of it again. Okay. My methods aren't always the best, but they seem to work, at least for me. I've always been a huge proponent of what's the best way to do something, the way that works for you. I do have to be careful with my scalpel that, I'm not cutting against like a template piece right now. If I cut my binding on my notepad, then it will be trash. And I don't want it to be trash, because it's the only one I got. All right, so we have cut one of these out ish. Now we will, I'm going to pause the camera and I'll just cut out another one right quick so that we can save 30-45 seconds of video, and we'll be right back. Okay, so I cut out my 2 cardboard pieces. Now we'll see how well I did. I'm going to just place them on the leather here, being careful that where my stitch line is needs to be off the edge of the cardboard. Okay. Very important reason for that is you won't get your edges to glue together right if they are on the cardboard. Okay. It's really funny if you find, if you take something that was cheaply made overseas and you rip it open, sometimes you'll find some of the cardboard that they used in there might be something like a part of a soap box or something like that. It's just really interesting, you know, that they're not wasting any kind of material apparently. That being said, I don't really like to line stuff with you know, non-leather, but on something like a notebook, it's okay. This is not a piece that's going to get a lot of weather or take a lot of wear. It's just going to be a notebook that I use for my meetings and stuff that I go to. So, all right, so we have to glue the cardboard down. And we do that by, first we'll spread glue all over this thing, and then we will put glue on one side of the cardboard. So the easiest way to start this is I'll just pour some. Okay, and if I got too much, that's fine, we'll share some of it with the cardboard. And my glue is a mess. I need to clean that bottle off. Alright, so I'm going to glue, and I'm going to make sure I get all the way out to my edges on my glue. I totally should have put a piece of paper down first. Didn't do it. That's okay. One trick is, if you're using contact cement like this, when it gets out on your desk and stuff like that, don't try to wipe it off while it's wet. Let it dry, and then you can just roll it up in your fingers. Same with if you get some on your leather where you don't want it, like the finished side. Don't try to wipe it off wet. You're just going to wipe it into the pores and get it stuck in there for good. Let it dry, and you should be able to just run your finger over it and it'll roll right off. Now granted, I said should be able to. Please do not leave me a nasty comment if you tried that trick and it didn't work and now your project is ruined and you want to blame Aaron. Should work. I know it would work on this leather. Again, this is a very waxed finished, very extremely smooth and slick type finish on this leather. If it was really shiny, I would even call it like patent leather, but not. It looks much more natural than the patent leather. I hate patent leather. Just comparing its slickness. Alright, so I now have glue all over that piece. Now I have to get it all over one side of each of my cardboard pieces. Okay, and this stuff should, since the cardboard's not near as porous as the leather, it should spread on there pretty quickly and evenly. Glue jar is getting pretty empty here. I should have filled it up. I had it full earlier when I was planning on making this video, but the girls have been in here most of the afternoon working on last minute Christmas presents and stuff, so it's not as full as it was earlier. I know I'm working almost off camera here, but I'm just trying to get this glue spread on this, and then I'm actually going to pause it once I get it on one of these, because there's no reason for you to watch me spread glue all over both of them. This is actually a relatively quick build. Still trying to decide if I want to hand sew it or machine sew it. I mean, I could finish this thing in a matter of minutes, really, if I was machine sewing, minus edge time. Edge time always takes more. So, alright, so I have it all over one side of my cardboard, and I will pause the video and do the other piece of cardboard. And not the other side, but the other piece. So we'll be right back. Alright, my glue's had time to set up, and I had time to roll all the extra glue off my desk, except that spot. So now I'm just going to place these two pieces kind of back where I had them, approximately 1/4 of an inch or so from each edge, just so I know that my liner leather will reach past them and glue down on all the sides, and then we can stitch around it. So there's that. So now when I line the entire piece, that center area there will be a little bit thinner, and it will fold to act as the gusset for this notebook. This is not a very thick notebook at all, but it can be really nice. So next thing I have to do is take my 2 to 3 ounce here that I'm lining it with. This is some English bridle here, and I'm just gonna set this piece on top of that piece. I will cut it off where I know that, you know, like the clamps from the tannery and stuff like that aren't in the way. There we go. All right, now I will turn each of these pieces over, and I know as long as I stay towards this side, then I'll avoid those, and then the rest of this is pretty much blemish free. Okay, but also now this is the side I want to stay toward because the clamps are now over here, or where the clamps were. And I'm going to take an ink pen and I'm going to draw this part onto that leather. Okay, doesn't have to be exact, doesn't have to be right on the money by any means. I'm just going to draw a rough square around it. Okay, now I'm going to take and spread glue all over the backs of each of these pieces of cardboard, and then I'm going to spread glue all over inside that square there. Okay, when I come back, that glue will be spread and we will press these two together. So give me a minute. All right, got glue all over the place here, glue all over the place here. And I'm just going to set them together. And press down firmly in all areas. Okay, and I'll turn it over right quick. I'm gonna especially run my fingers around the outsides of the liner because I need it to adhere to the base piece of leather as well as the liner. Just like that. Now I'll take my squeaky toy . Okay, now I know that is good and stuck, so the next thing I'm going to do is trim off the excess of my lining piece as soon as I get this extra glue off my desk. Never fails to find it. Alright, and then see, we've got some glue here on our project that you can tell is already dry, so I'm just going to rub it out. Okay, I'll take my scalpel again, and I'm just going to cut out or cut off my lining piece. And I'm going to use the assistance of a straight edge, and then I don't have to cut quite as slowly and deliberately, because I can just run this sucker right down my straight edge and not worry about it getting into the good part. there we go. So now we have nice trimmed lining. Okay. So now it's time to, now that we've got the outside cover completed, basically, we've got to look and see what other parts of this template we need to make, because this isn't the only piece. So where are my other pieces of my template? Okay, so here we have the notepad pocket, the inside spare paper pocket, and the card pocket. Okay, all of these can be cut out of 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, even 4 to 5 if you needed to. I've got this 2 to 3 sitting here, and so why not use it? Keep in mind the amount of rigidness that you want your completed project to have when deciding what thickness to make this. I'm okay with cutting these all out of 2 to 3 because there's already a lining with the main body with a stiffener in there. So I know my notebook's not going to be all floppy, and I don't like floppy. I like the more rigid notebook. It's just nicer to me. But you may be looking for something you can roll up and stuff in a bag pocket or something, and hey, that's your goal for your project. No problem. All right, so I need to cut out one of each of these pieces. All right. Now I could bore you and make you watch me, and you know, then you can fast forward and try not to miss anything. Blah blah blah. Or I can just pause this camera and magically come back, and we'll be done. All right, so we got all our pieces cut out here. All right, this is going to go behind the notepad. This is for the just the extra papers or whatever, and then this should fit right on top of here, and it is for business cards. Excuse me, and the likes. So we got to do a little bit of stitching now. We got to glue in this piece into the main body. We got to glue in this piece onto here, and then we got to glue in, well, sorry, first we'll stitch just that little line right there, and then we'll glue this one into the main body as well, and then we perimeter stitch the entire thing. I don't know if I mentioned it, I'm sorry, but we will stitch one line of this, the center line, into the back of the notebook as well. So we have to get out our notebook here. Oh, the wife is calling. I'd better pause this. All right, I did not make the deadline of Tanner getting out of karate. So all right, so I need to glue this piece into here on 3 sides. All right, this has to be open for the notebook, of course. So I need to glue it on these 3 sides right here. All right, this is a very thin edge, being 2 to 3 ounce. So I tell you what I'm going to do. As opposed to burnishing, I'm going to hit it up with a torch lighter on the back end on this side right here. The outside we will burnish the entire thing. But the inside here, I'm just going to hit it up with this torch lighter. That will ensure that there's not any kind of fuzzies and stuff like that. And I'll do it across the top as well. All right, that should, now that my shop smells a little of burnt leather. All right, so that's going to make a very clean line, both right here and right here, so that's good. All right, now what I need to do is take my stylus. I'm going to put a straight edge down on the very edge of this leather here. I'm going to take my stylus and I'm going to mark where this lies so that I can put my glue line down. All right, focus camera, focus. Okay, so I've scribed a little line in there, and that's going to tell me where my glue needs to go. And I'm just going to put a very, very narrow little dab of glue on there. hopefully. I get pretty shaky. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and do that on all three sides. So I'll do it across the bottom. And I'm going to do it up the other side, making sure not to place any glue higher than that little piece is going to be. Okay. Now I'll do the exact same thing on the back side of my pocket that's going over that. Let me set this aside here. Alright. You can see on here which side I burned just a second ago, but that's fine. Nobody will ever see it again once I stick these pieces together. And again, I'm just getting glue right on the edge of the sides and the bottom, not the top. If I get it on the top, then I just glued my notebook shut and I can't get the notepad in there. Alright, I'll set this aside, let that glue set up, and let the glue on my desk here once again dry, and that way I can roll it off in just a minute. Okay, so the glue set up, the glue dried on my desk. Now I'm going to carefully place the pocket on the main body. And I'll press all my edges down so that they'll adhere nicely. All right, got a little bit of glue, a little bit too far out over here, but honestly, after I'm done sewing, I can just take my stylus and I'll be able to just pull that right off and it'll roll off just like it's been doing from my desk. So not that big a deal. Now is the critical moment of, am I hand sewing this or am I machine sewing it? I want badly to hand sew it, but, well, no buts. I'm going to hand sew it. So this piece now needs to glue to this piece, and then I'm going to I'll sew that little line right there, and then we're going to finish that edge right there, because it's going to be out here flapping where people can actually see it, so it should be a finished edge. All right, so once again we're going to set this up, and we'll make sure that our glue is not going to go past where the little pocket is. So I'm just going to mark the tops of the pocket with my fingernails. Such a light line I can't even show it to you. Now I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the both pieces, right along the very edge. There we go. All right. I'm going to have to pause the camera again while we let this glue set up for a minute, and then we'll stick it all together. Well, I apologize. I got a little overzealous and I stuck this piece together before I turned the camera back on. I'm sorry. So anyway, I need to sew up that little area right there. So I'm going to grab my mat, which was hiding in a box. And my 8 stitches per inch pricking irons, because they're my fave. And I need to use a wing divider here and mark this stitch line right quick, just to make sure it's where it needs to be. Alright, so real simple, we're just gonna punch in some holes. I'm actually gonna set my top hole above the level of the little card pocket, just because that's not something you can do with a machine. If I'm gonna hand stitch it, it's gonna look hand stitched. Okay, and then I'm gonna sew this line all the way down to about 1/4 of an inch from the base of it here, which will be, you know, part of the rest of the notebook here in a few minutes. Pretty soon I'm going to do a video on saddle stitching, but that video is not going to be tonight. So yeah, I will pause this while I hand sew this a little bit. And then I think I will show just a little bit of stitching when we go to sew the main body together. Whoop, I apologize. I have 2 things to hand sew. Alright, so this part gets a little tricky because all of your finished sewing should be from the finished side of the leather. Okay? So, it's hard to do that because it's hard to see where that line is needing to be to sew it. So we got to do a little bit of measuring and math here. Okay, so that line is 5 5/8 inches from the edge here. Okay, so what I need to do is come in from the edge, and I'll go down to, say, I don't know, 5 and a little bit more than a half. Sorry, I was trying to make sure I had this is the bottom of the notebook right now. So, and I'm going to check it by holding the ruler where I want to put it and just looking down the edge from my view here and making sure that if I draw that line right there, it's overlapping this pocket here, okay? And it is, but just barely. So I'm going to bring it out just a slight bit more, almost to that 5 1/2 mark, okay? And I'll use my stylus, and I'm going to make sure when I use my stylus, I get right up against the ruler here, okay? Now, here's the other thing I could have done, is set this sucker up here, right? But I'd need to move it a little bit just to make sure that, and again, if you had the paper taken off of here, you would be able to see that a lot easier. So, I've lined it up with my bottom here, and I've lined it up where I know that there's about 1/8 of an inch overlap over here, and I'm going to draw me a nice pretty line. Now, I could make the line just the length of the pocket itself, but I think I'm going to go ahead and make it the entire length of the notebook, and that way if you're looking at the back of it, you don't just see a partial line. One of the main reasons for that is I am going to use a contrasting thread color. I'm going to use the cream thread that you've seen me use 1,000 times, or as many videos as I've made. And since it's going to stick out like a sore thumb anyway, I want it to stick out evenly, I guess would be the word. So, where is, I'm going to take my my Berry King stitch groover here, and I'm actually going to use that, or I'll use a straight edge here. Okay, I'm going to use this straight edge, and I'm going to groove that so it'll make a nice pretty stitch all the way up. Okay, and I'll stop about 1/4 of an inch short of both ends so that it doesn't get involved with the stitch line that goes around the perimeter later. Okay. And all I did is I took my little guide, edge guide out of the stitch groover so that it would follow this ruler and not, the edge of a piece of leather. So now I've got to go through and make the holes in that groove just like I did in this. And when I come back, this and this will be sewn together. Be right back. Alright, so did some hand stitching. So there's the stitch down the back of the notebook right there. There's what it looks like on the inside. And I also stitched up just this little area right here on the little pocket. And I went ahead and threw my maker's mark kind of right there. I wanted to make sure if the cards were in here, it was still above that. I did leave this thread on here because I always like to show off this little trick. Take your scalpel to cut these threads. Take your scalpel and just lay it on the leather, and then take the thread and rub it back and forth against the scalpel, and it'll cut that thread off really nice and even, and you don't have to burn it down or worry about fraying and things like that. You can do the same on the back. If you do it this way and you rub the string against the scalpel instead of the scalpel against the string, you don't risk slipping and cutting your leather or nicking your other threads. All right, so yeah. All right, so the next thing I need to do, okay, is to take my stitch groover. I'm going to do this before I glue this in. I'm going to take my stitch groover and go all the way around the perimeter of this piece. And the reason I'm doing it before I glue that piece in is because right now it's laying nice and flat. And once I put that in there, then there'll be a little bump there that it may not want to completely climb over when I go to glue it in. Hope that makes sense. So I'm going to take my stitch groover. I'm going to start on the back side here. Kind of figure out my measurement for my edge. And tighten my little guide back on there. I'm going about 1/8 of an inch or so from the edge. Maybe a little bit more. And I'm going to just groove all the way around the project. Okay. I do want to make sure that my edges are nice and flat. This is always a clenching time because sure would stink to screw up one of these grooves, and that would just totally screw up the whole project. So we don't want to do that. Okay, 2 sides or side and a half done. Three sides done. And I'll just complete that last little bit there. There we go, all the way around. Now, I am going to glue this piece in right there. And then the rest of this project is as simple as stitching up around the exterior perimeter, folding it in half, and putting it under a book overnight to lay flat. I will finish my edges up and stuff like that, but I mean, if I were using a sewing machine, we'd be done in just a couple of more minutes. I unfortunately am not using a sewing machine, so we will not be done in a couple of minutes. And I really kind of hate to even extend this video. You know, I could take this thing home tonight and hand stitch it and finish up the edges tomorrow morning, and yeah, but that unfortunately won't work out with the video. So what I'm going to do is just show you everything I'm going to do to finish this thing, and there we go. So I have set this piece on here where it belongs, and I marked with my fingernail just right there at the top edge and the side edge of where it's going to go. But I also forgot something extremely important, which is I need to finish this edge right here. Okay, so I'm going to take my my edge beveler. It's a number 1 here. I'm just going to bevel this edge down on both sides. Very, very lightly. I'm not doing it aggressively at all because this is a thinner leather and I don't need to take a ton of it off. I just want to take that little 90-degree corner off of it. Okay. Alright. Just in the interest of saving time, I'm going to use Ron's Edge Rub tonight because it is faster than using the clear edge ink. But that's only going to be on this piece right here because it is veg tan. The exterior perimeter with that waxy tan stuff, I'm actually going to use the clear edge ink to go all the way around it, and it'll give it a really nice finished glossy edge all the way around. I'm just sanding these two pieces together here so that gets any of the glue out and stuff like that. May actually even trim it up just a tiny bit and sand it some more, just to make sure those two edges are so perfectly aligned as I can get them. All right. Re-edge that right quick, re-sand it right quick. Okay, now I'm going to use a little bit of Ron's Edge Rub on there and do a quick burnish on that edge. And it will, since I'm not dyeing the edge, it'll still resemble the rest of the edges with the natural color, even though I am using 2 different edge products on it. The edges will still match, so that'll be okay. Okay, I'm going to take my little edging tool here and just give it a once over with that. That canvas is pretty coarse for such a fine leather edge as far as the thickness of the leather edge. So yeah, use my edging tool and just complete that burnish there. And then I'll do it right here against the edge of the table too to make sure that it didn't cause another corner on the edge of the leather. So I'll just press that down. Alright, so back to where we were before I remembered to do that. I'm glad I did. I'm going to glue this thing to that thing and punch a bunch of holes all the way around it and take it home and sew it. Alright, so I already marked with my fingernails. Let me get that out of the way. Marked with my fingernails right there and right there. So I know where to stop my glue. Okay, and I'm going to get out my glue bottle one last time on this project. And I'll glue up just the very edge of this. set it aside real quick, and I'll glue up the very, very edge of this. Then we'll stick them together. All right. Good enough. Now I'm going to stick these together. Like so. Make sure they're good and stuck. Okay, now I have 2 steps left to finishing this book. One is I'll go around it with my irons and I will put holes all the way around the perimeter. Then I'm going to hand stitch all that. Then I'm going to complete my edges using the clear edge ink. You can see that on some of the other videos that I've done recently. I'm actually going to make a new video of just the clear edge ink so people can see that. And then, yeah, I'm going to fold this sucker in half and put it under a heavy book overnight so that that seam right there gets nice and pressed. And this thing's going to be ready for duty tomorrow morning, which is when I need it. So there you go. So let's do this. All right, for my sign off, I guess you could say. Again, I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply. You can find the template for this notebook at makersleathersupply.com, or also any of your Tandy stores have them. I'm not sure if they're in every single store yet, but I know we're working toward that. So anyway, we're more than happy to help you with anything you need. If there's ever a template you would like to see or a pattern you'd like to see made, man, put it in the comments. Other than that, feel free to like, subscribe, and all that other fun stuff so you see when we put more stuff out. Until then, I'm Aaron Heiser, Maker's Leather Supply, and I appreciate you watching.